Okay, my dear. What shall we discuss?
Yeah, which one do you want to do first?
What was the first one on your list?
It was
Can we
the different conflict profiles, like who you are in conflict.
Oh, who you are in conflict. Okay, sure. Okay, so talking about the various ways people show up in conflict.
Yeah, and
What?
I feel like we've talked a lot in our conversations about this idea of often people will say, oh, I'm conflict avoidant. I avoid conflict. Or, I see myself as a very confrontational person.
Yeah.
Just discussing more about those ways in which people profile themselves in conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess just talking about that.
And so what we know, first off, about people who say they're conflict avoiders is that there's no such thing. Mm-hmm. So you can't avoid conflict. You can prevent it, and you can de-escalate it, and you can resolve it, but you can't avoid it. Because what happens when someone thinks that they're avoiding conflict is that it's either festering further inside them, perhaps having no influence on anyone else who's involved, but certainly having great damaging influence on them, or it is further escalating it amongst everybody because it needs to be addressed and perhaps other people want it to be addressed. So if you're avoiding it, thinking that you're preventing it from getting any worse, or perhaps that it will just go away, it's just going to get worse over time. Mm-hmm. So either worse in just become chronic, or worse in terms of escalation. So there's just no such thing as avoiding. And thinking that you're an avoider and perhaps that makes you a peacemaker or a peacekeeper, that's really misguided and detrimental to everyone involved, including you.
Yeah. So what would you say for someone who is a bit more timid going into conflict, and that's why they say they're conflict avoidant, because they're afraid to initiate the conversation or acknowledge that something is wrong to the other person? Like, what would you say some steps would
for obviously every situation would be different, every circumstance. However, I would encourage them first that it needs to be acknowledged, right? If it's something coming from them, then it needs to be acknowledged, and that the whole thing can be initiated by a question. So that you don't have to go in ready, firing on all engines, anything like that, that you want to say, it feels like things aren't right between us. It feels like things aren't working. And if you're in more formal context, in work context, you can say, it feels like we're not working well together right now. I'd like to address that. So always being plain about your intentions, and so that people feel calm when you're presenting those intentions. They don't feel like you're there to attack them. And then to phrase things as a question to begin. Could we talk about this and see if we can fix it? Is there a time that we can talk about this? And again, being plain about your intention and re-emphasizing that you really want to resolve it so that you can move on. And either if it's about work, that you can be peacefully productive together, or you can just be peaceful together if it's a more personal relationship. But to approach it like that, so then you can be confident, even if you're a timid person, that the other person's not going to receive you poorly. Right? They're not going to feel like there's a sudden barrage or interrogation or attack coming on. They're going to understand right from the beginning, from your first words, how you're approaching this, which is in a gentle, clarifying, curious, and hopefully committed kind of way, committed to ultimately resolving.
I think that's an important thing to note too, like being very specific with your words and very to the point about them, and not like bringing it up in a roundabout way. Just being very clear and specific about what you want out of a conversation, or like why you're initially bringing it up, sort of thing.
It can be really difficult. The more upset people are, the more sensitive the issues are. It can be really difficult to be simple and plain about the thing you're experiencing. But if you can focus instead on being simple and plain about setting up the conversation, that can ease you into the experience sharing part of it. That's the best way to lay that foundation.
Ripping off a Band-Aid, just saying, hey, can we talk about this energy that's been going on between us, or whatever has been happening. I feel like it often is just like the energy that someone is receiving from someone else is like something's changed, and bringing it up, because I think it often is like both people will see it, someone just has to acknowledge it.
Yeah, and asking that. So such a difference between saying, could we talk? And I'm feeling like things aren't going well between us in whatever way. Could we talk? Such a difference between that and coming up to someone and saying, we need to talk.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the different impact just on you if you're receiving that. There's no way I want to talk to someone who comes up to me and announces that we need to talk, particularly if it's in any kind of harsh tone. And yes, what you're saying about space is a key. You know, that's why we spend so much time talking about the space between or amongst us, because that has a life of its own that's created by all the participants. But again, it has a life of its own, and it needs to be addressed, and it's perceptible. We experience the space. That's why we talk about things in a daily way, like the tension in the room. You could cut it with a knife, or the vibe, or that group working together. They have such a good vibe. You know, these are the ways that we're referring to that thing that exists in the space between or amongst us. And when it's conflict ridden, that's very obvious. Even if it's silent, it's very obvious. It still has that life to it.
So then with someone who, you know, profiles themselves as being a lot more confrontational and a bit more outspoken, I feel like you often see with those sorts of people, they are the we need to talk kind of people. They're the we need to talk. They're not the could we have a conversation about this? I'm going to tell you how I feel. We need to talk.
Yeah, you're going to listen to me.
So on the flip side, how would you say with someone who is more confrontational, how can they go into it with a little bit more ease, and even like trying to regulate their emotions before the conversation, because I think they are the people to go into it high strung and hot with very hot.
Yeah, well, we need to bring them to the same place. We need to bring them to the place where they will ask questions and be curious and be plain about good intentions, meaning the intention to resolve, not just to attack. So even if they're inclined to attack in the beginning, that's the thing that needs to be managed, and so that they can walk in instead with that calmness. We need calm for resolution. It doesn't mean we need calm throughout the process. There will be outbursts if there are very sensitive issues that have been breached. There could very well be outbursts, and if you can tolerate some of that while people release it, that can be good and needed. But ultimately, to walk through the rest of the resolution process, we absolutely need calm, or we can't achieve sustainable results. So we need to bring the people who would be on the attack, we need to bring them to the place where they can be plain about a commitment to resolution and ask those same questions. So we're bringing them to the same place as the others who are timid from essentially different directions. And then it's really important to understand and often to talk about what confrontation means. So really that's just about facing something together. That's what that term is about. And it's been so, you know, we colloquially use it for being on the attack. And it's unfortunate because I find it to be a pretty useful term. If we can think about aiming for resolution as being something that we are facing together. We're standing here together, side by side. We're going to slog through whatever we need to slog through. And then by doing so and asking thoughtful questions, we'll get to the place we need to go in satisfying each person's needs. So, but the attack is never helpful. Having said that, anyone who has inner conflict and or is feeling anger towards other people, that needs to be processed. That's why sometimes it's processed in the conversation that's trying to achieve resolution. But what's really good is when you can find a trusted person to process that with who's not involved in the conflict, right? Where you can just get it out, say what you want to say, so that you can then calm down, because that's a release. So it's a physiological as well as a mental release. And then once you have that release, your body will calm, hopefully, mostly. And then you can begin to manage to think about and to conduct yourself in a way that is best to manage in order to achieve resolution. But it needs to be processed. So if it's not processed outside any kind of resolution talk or process, it's going to come out then, right? And that's why there are sometimes outbursts, even when everyone's trying their best, because something needs to be released. It needs to be heard. And if you haven't achieved calm before you walk in the room, it's likely going to be heard in a way that's not calm.
And say there are two confrontational people, two more fiery personalities coming at each other, and they both have that easy ability to get upset quicker. They're just one of those more fiery people. And they are both in this conversation together, and emotions quickly rise. Like, how do you get both sides to kind of regulate and be on each other's level without stirring up emotions quickly?
That's a good question. I would encourage them to find someone to facilitate. Find someone who can be neutral, who is either completely neutral or is equally supportive and caring of whoever's involved. So that there's someone there who's even keeled, who can gently bring them back, who is not a source of any of the conflict. So it's not going to further escalate the people involved. And obviously whoever's involved in the process of resolution is going to have to agree to that person. So it has to be someone both or all parties agree to. But that's why we have mediators. That's why we have formally and informally. That's why we have people who end up in the middle of other people, because that makes the process reliable. It helps keep everybody accountable to calm and to engaging in more constructive ways. And it helps, when you get off track, that can be the person then whose role it is to just gently bring you back, because they can maintain clarity because they're not upset about anything. And they just want the best for the outcome for these people involved.
Yeah, I think that's a really good thing that I didn't even think about. I didn't even think about
Facilitating. We talk about mediators formally, but I'm telling you, there are people who are naturally inclined to be mediators. And certainly all of us at one time or another are performing or taking on that role on behalf of people that we care about, right? There's just something going on that they can't even get to sit down together perhaps. And we care about both of them, and we can see that there can be light at the end of the tunnel. And if we can just sit down, and if we can, sometimes that means talking to each of them separately first, right? But then ultimately bringing them together and being there for support. It's a very powerful role to be playing for people in your life.
Yeah, for sure. And do you think in your work that there are any other profile or specific types of people who go into conflict? Do you see something other than someone who is timid going into conflict, avoidant, or someone who is confrontational? Is there someone in the middle? Is there someone like completely different? What do you typically see?
I think in a way, there are as many inclinations in conflict as there are people, right? Because we have just unique, we're unique bundles of influence and habits and values. So our values really influence not only what gets us into conflict, but then how we conduct ourselves and what matters to us about resolving conflict. And certainly we can think about different personalities or even different people who have been in different kinds of jobs, particularly if they've been doing it for a long time, have patterns of how they conduct themselves. Right? So someone who's used to being an administrator and coordinating and running meetings and all that kind of stuff, they're likely going to show up to a resolution process in that administration kind of mindset, which can be very helpful in terms of keeping us on track and making sure we walk through all the steps that are necessary and so on. But it could be offensive to the other people who are involved, that they feel like they're taking over control. And so all those things need to be managed. And it comes from not formulas, but from about paying attention, right? making sure you, as someone who's directly involved, walk in calm and you understand your own habits and your own triggers and things. And if you're one of the people who's upset, that you understand exactly what you're upset about, that you prepare as much as you can, particularly if it's a planned discussion that you're having. And then that you're paying attention. And the two principles of communication that you know very well, that I am always going on and on about, are simply to ask and acknowledge. So if we keep those two things in mind, whenever we find ourselves at an impasse or an escalation, to say, is there something I need to acknowledge right now? Meaning, in the case of if we're stuck or things are ramping up, is there something I'm bringing to that? Am I the one that's escalating right now? So, and if I am, so I'm asking that thoughtful question of myself, what do I need to acknowledge to everybody? And then what can we do about that? So would this be a good time for a break? Right, so everyone can calm down. So that's just one example of the kind of place that we need to practice asking or acknowledging. Usually one or the other or both together are the things that will move us from one difficult moment or stuck moment into the next place we need to go. And I think when people get very comfortable with that, you see a big difference in how comfortable they are overall. They're not so worried about, they're not so kind of feeling desperate to find formulas, which don't exist, because they realize how well it's working. Because they start practicing it in daily life. They'll show up to work and start practicing that. Let me just think, okay, things are difficult right now in this project. We're not communicating very well. Is there something I'm bringing to that?
Yeah.
What can I acknowledge about that? And are there some thoughtful questions I can ask to elicit thought and response from other people that can then move us along, right? Get us back to the actions that we need to be involved in next. Yeah, so really, as many people, of course, it's easy to talk about people who are really timid and people who are confrontational. But it's important not to be focused even on trying to find archetypes or trying to label people, but just to deal with what's coming at you, to prepare yourself as best you can, and then to deal with what comes, to be able to field things. It's important, even though conflict resolution, and certainly interest-based conflict resolution, is a very particular process of a certain number of steps that need to be participated in a certain way. There's also the need within that, and even within that order of things, to be able to pivot, right? To see, oh, we thought we were at this place. Really, we need to revisit. Let's go back. I'm recognizing someone's still upset about a thing we thought we covered. Let's go back and make sure that's thoroughly dealt with. And so then we know what we're building is solid and that the results will be sustainable, which is key. Sometimes we think that if we're confronting something or someone confronts us about something, that there's a result, because there can be immediate result or immediate response, but it's not reliable because it wasn't built. Right? It was imposed, it was forced, people were blindsided perhaps. So we have to build it, and it's slogging work. It's unglamorous work at its best, and it's slogging and sometimes painful work at its worst. But it achieves, if we participate thoroughly and thoughtfully, it achieves the sustainable results we need.
And say in a given situation, there is someone who still, even with all of these things, like there is an attacker, like someone who is saying things that are very hurtful. And is that a time where you would say stop and revisit another day? Or that's where boundaries. That's one place where boundaries need to be implemented right away. So you make decisions together, whoever's involved. You make decisions together about how you're going to proceed, how we're going to conduct ourselves, how we're going to treat each other to the best of our ability. And perhaps we can manage a few outbursts if those happen, if they're really about the substance of someone's experience and so on. But when someone is just going on the attack, when someone's being completely destructive, then you have to draw the line. And first you can remind them, right? Everyone can remind them to refer back to what we agreed to at the beginning. And that can be enough sometimes. That kind of interruption can be enough. You can offer a break.
But if those things don't work, those mechanisms don't work, absolutely it's boundary time. And the best way to establish a boundary is to be firm and clear, and then say, if you feel like we can revisit this, I'm here for that. I'd make myself available for us to try this again.
Yeah.
So you can let me know, but we cannot proceed in this way. This will not get us to resolution. And so to do your best not to respond in kind with the same kind of energy, but to be firm and clear, and to say, it's a very encouraging and productive thing to say, I'm not taking any more of this now, but I am completely willing to make myself available if we can meet again and not proceed in this way. And that is often what resolves conflict.
Yeah.
And sometimes that'll be, the next day, someone will wake up and say, okay, I really want this resolved.
Yeah.
And they'll call, and you can go ahead with it right away. And sometimes that'll be a year or more, right? But it could still happen. And that's why it's really important to leave things in that way. Essentially, you're doing everything you can do in that moment, given the circumstances, given the behavior and conduct of other people and so on. You're doing everything you can do. You're laying it all down at their feet. You're indicating your commitment to future and the conditions of that. And then you walk away so that you're not damaged any further. Yeah. So certainly, unfortunately, boundaries have to be a part of the practice. But drawing them can still facilitate those ultimate results that you would want and need.
I know I asked this question about two confrontational people going to just conversation, and so what about two more timid people? I think that's almost like we're trying to get something out of both of them, or having two more timid people sitting down and saying, okay, something's wrong here.
This is where we might think a lot about the role of advocacy. So similar, can still be a completely neutral person like a mediator, and formal or informal, doesn't matter, but it's someone who can voice things for the people who either are being prevented from voicing it by forces at large, or who are so timid they can't voice their own needs and concerns and walk through things vocally in that way. So having someone who's willing to show up for however many people and whoever is involved, they can take on that role, right? Where they're not necessarily, so they can just take on the role of a supportive mediator, whether they know people or not. But they can also help to voice things. So if everyone is willing there, and everyone's kind of struggling equally to voice their needs and voice their experience of the conflict, they can be helpful in that. People are willing to have them engage in that way.
And I would say that's a point where having someone who's also very good at identifying body language would be really good, because I think, we were talking some about this earlier, but someone who's very agreeable and they're just sitting there kind of saying, okay, but like physically there's something that you can tell where like, well, you're not okay. And so having someone who is good at identifying body language, I think would be really helpful in that scenario, as well as this advocate, or even the two people discussing possibly know each other's body language and can identify things and have that conversation better. But yeah, I think in this way, if people who are more agreeable or more timid in these sorts of conversations, their body language may be an identifier more than their actual words.
It certainly might be one. I would encourage people, though, not to look at body language and identify it as a conclusion. It's important to pay attention to people's body language and then ask questions to confirm what you might be thinking. So if you think that someone's body language looks really closed off, remember that classic example of someone with their arms crossed. They could be shut down and closed off, or they could just be cold. Right? So we want to pay attention live as we're walking through things with people, And then if we're thinking something negative is happening in the realm of body language, we want to ask, are you okay? Or if we've asked them to sign off on something and they've in a kind of passive or passive aggressive way said yes, but it's not going to be sustainable, it's not their true perspective, then to check in and confirm and make sure. And be plain about that. Say that, at each step of this, we need to ensure that everyone is truly on board before we move forward to the next one. We have to do that, or all of our work here is wasted. Right? And so that can be the thing that encourages them to speak the truth. And when you're the one asking the person, to welcome the difficulty. So if you're having difficult feelings, or if you're not sure about this, we welcome you voicing that and us stumbling through to figure that out, because again, that's how we get to sustainable results. Right? Instead of just glossing over things and sweeping stuff under the rug, we're just going to cause more trouble in the end. Than fix things. So we want our efforts to yield sustainable results.
Definitely.
This is quite a place to be talking about conflict.
Right. Oh, goodness. But like we were saying, with all the people who are going to start being here come July and June, sure there will be lots of conflict in the hot environment.
Crowded summer beaches. Yes, probably lots and lots.
Children all around.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that you have found in your work and conflict profiles and anything of that sort?
About people's habits and inclinations?
Yes.
Well, I could probably go on about it for days, but I think those are good fundamentals. Fundamental considerations, 2 good examples, even though I don't encourage labeling people or searching for archetypes. I do think the timid and the more aggressive, those are 2 good points to begin your considerations and how to manage. And to think about yourself, where are you on the spectrum? And that can change in different periods of your life, and it can change in different kinds of conflicts. Often those changes are according to your values. So you might find yourself in a conflict and you are an active party to it. There is something you're upset about, but it's annoying, or it in practical terms, it needs to be addressed, but it doesn't matter to you that much. And so you can conduct yourself in a very calm way quite easily. And then you find yourself in a conflict that's about the things you hold most dear, the values that are most important to you. And it's a much more challenging situation in which to maintain calm, walk through every step, listen open-mindedly to others. So it's important to consider that about yourself as you are meeting any conflict that does arise for you.